up, everybody? It's Mike from Forward Observer and Gray Zone Activity. Let's talk about preparedness today. A buddy of mine, from high school, texted me the other day and he said, "Hey, Mike, how would you get started? Or what are some things that you would buy if you had $1,000 and we're trying to get into emergency preparedness?" And the answer to that is, number one, if I didn't have one already, I'd buy some means of self-defense, such as a firearm, and I would also learn how to use it. That's a completely other video. Number two, I would buy water filtration or some kind of water filter system. After that, I would not buy anything else. I literally would not buy another damn thing before I did an area study. And the reason you want to do an area study is because that is where you analyze your operating environment, your operational environment. Your operational environment is, I have 6 layers. The thing that I recommend to do an area study, there's 6 layers of my operating environment. That's number one, physical terrain. I'm looking at physical terrain features, hills, mountains, valleys, etc., etc. If it's on a topo map, I'm looking at it. And I want to figure out how, number one, I want to figure out what's there. And then the second step is to identify the effects of that. Can I use that? That's something I can use. Is that something that's going to be used against me, or potentially could be used against me in the future by an enemy or an adversary or some form of threat? So physical terrain. After that, we move to human. By the way, I did this whole I got a 30-minute video on this, so we'll breeze through that. We'll breeze through my 6 layers of the operating environment, and I'll post a link in the show notes about or the description, so you can watch that video. Number 2, human terrain. I'm looking at who is in my community, not just name and age and sex and all that stuff. I'm looking at politics, behavior, attitudes, religious preferences, any kind of in-group preference. I'm looking at how my neighbors think about, or what they think about government, what they think about law enforcement, what they think about the Second Amendment, what they think about gun owners, what they think about crime, what they think about gangs, what they think about me. That is the human terrain. That's something that we really have to understand, because when we find favorable human terrain, we have to go and develop it. When we find potentially adversarial human terrain, we've got to figure out, all right, how can we mitigate these risks during an SHTF environment or during some kind of protracted conflict? After human terrain, we look at critical infrastructure. What keeps your world spinning? I was on the way into work today, I was looking at, there's kind of like these industrial buildings. And he said, I said, I don't know actually what's over there. And so I took a drive over there, and I got online later and looked up what all the companies that are over there. And what we need to do really is find dual use industrial facilities, find those companies that are making widgets today, but tomorrow, if we became friends with them, if they're ideologically simpatico with us, if they were down for the cause, they could be making something completely different that would actually benefit us and our community in the long run. So that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about when I talk about critical infrastructure, but also that's lights, water and sewage, and et cetera, et cetera. Next is politics and governance. Who are your elected and unelected officials? Who make the rules for you? After that, we have military, law enforcement, and security. Same thing. Who's enforcing the rules, and what kind of military and law enforcement assets do you have in your backyard? What are their capabilities and limitations? Might be important to understand in the future. Are they people that we can work with, or are they going to be potentially adversarial towards people who are not in uniform? Also, security. Private security gets overlooked. I think in a lot of, in my experience at least, I'm looking at private security companies, armed and unarmed. And I want to understand more about them, because if there is an emergency, I want to know who's going to be supplementing law enforcement. Or I want to know who's going to be posting private security in the area. After that, we have economics and finance. What are the economic drivers in your area? What are the employment trends? What's the unemployment rate? Et cetera, et cetera. And I go into a little bit more detail in that video, which I'll link in the description below. Now, the Army has a separate way that they define the operating environment, or the operational environment, and that is an acronym called Messi. there's a lot of overlap with mine, but I try to get a little more granular. Messi, political, military, economic, social, which includes demographic, information, and infrastructure. The only thing, I didn't mention it in mine, but it's also included in mine. But the first I in Messi, P-M-E-S-I-I, is information, and that goes into where do people get their information from? What's the information environment like? How biased is the media, or even worse, does the media have an agenda? And when we start looking at problems like that, there absolutely are solutions. So a buddy of mine lives in this town in North Carolina, and he said that their local newspaper had a left-leaning slant, or they're biased towards the left. And so they started a monthly micro newspaper, and they went around and they put it in gun shops, and they put it in all the retail stores that they could get it in, who might be ideologically inclined to allow that kind of thing to happen in their shop. So listen, as you come across problems in your area study, you might look at something and say, that's not ideal. I wish that were different, or I would like to change that. Well, come up with solutions. And the great thing about having a bunch of people, like, I don't know, a preparedness network or some other large group that you can lean on, is now we have a lot of people who can help to make things happen. A lot of people to volunteer so that we can start to change these things and mitigate the risks we're going to experience in an emergency. Now, the second major thing I want to talk about, I'm not dunking on this guy, and this is why I'm not calling him out. And it may even be the case that he didn't exactly mean what he said. But what he said was that the boring part of prepping or preparedness is that once you are prepared, you just sit around and wait. And you just sit around and wait for something to happen. And that is the wrong answer. There's always something you can be doing. For instance, there's always a new skill that you could be learning. There's always someone that you could be recruiting from your community into your group. There's always a skill to learn, to teach. There's always people to lead. And if you just have to start thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead, like, hey, yeah, I'm prepared, but what happens when I have an encounter with my neighbor? Well, okay, that's a risk, and that should be in your area study. My neighbors don't care about preparedness, and maybe they have small children. This actually happened to me during the last polar vortex. I went around and talked to the people in my neighborhood, and the guy that lived across the street from me had 3 small kids, and I said, hey, man, what are you going to do if the power goes out? And it's 20 degrees, or it's 5 degrees outside, and it's 20 degrees inside. And he just looked at me like, I've actually never really thought of that. And you could just see the gears turning in his head. And he said, well, what do you think I should do? And so that's the kind of stuff. Just because you're prepared, frankly, doesn't mean anything. You have to be developing your local human terrain. I say you have to terraform your local human terrain. The better we can develop the human terrain, the better off you are going to be. And ideally, we turn people on the bubble. We turn strangers into acquaintances and acquaintances to friends, and then acquaintances and friends into allies. And the more people in your community you can recruit to your side before whatever event happens, before whatever event you're preparing for, the better off you're going to be. Because people, from my perspective as an intel guy, people means information. People mean information. Every individual out there has eyes and ears. They're talking to people, they're saying things, they're hearing things, they're experiencing things. And the more people I have in my group, the more people I have coming to me that say, oh, Mike, hey, by the way, I heard this the other day. Or I was in a meeting, or I was over at City Hall, or I was over at the courthouse, or I was over at X, Y, or Z place, and you might be interested in what happened. Let me tell you about it. And so people matter. Preparedness is not like there's no finish line in preparedness. There's always something you can be doing. If you find yourself waiting around because you feel prepared or you think you're prepared enough, it's the wrong answer. Find something else to do. There is simply no waiting. No waiting around for stuff to happen. And if you think you're prepared, go find someone else and get them up to your level. And then go do that again. And then have that person go find another person and get them up to your level. And pretty soon you go from you or your household to 2 or 3 households in your community or you're in your neighborhood. And then you go from 5 to 10 households in your neighborhood. And before you know it, you've got 20 plus 50 families who are all concerned about the same things and want to help push in the same direction. And guess what? They all live within a 5-minute drive of you. So if you want to put yourself in a much better situation, That's the kind of stuff you got to be doing. Counter organize and win. That's a separate video. I'll talk about that in the future. If you're not organizing your community, you're going to lose. It is going to be organized against you. Counter organize and win. Well, those are my thoughts today. Sorry, it's been a while since I've done a video. I will be, now that I'm in here and kind of rearranging stuff, I'll do more videos. Oh, by the way, I should have led with this. Hey, big thanks to Ex Umbris Designs for sending me this hat. They didn't have to send it, but they did. It's super cool. I went to their website. By the way, I'll post that website in the description below as well. Man, the next video, I really need to lead with this. They sent me the hat for free. They didn't have to do it, but they did. That's super cool. So I went to their website and bought a whole bunch of stuff. And they have an assault belt, actually. So I've got 3 belts now that I'm looking at. I've got the HSGI, just the padded belt. I've got a belt from Axel, from my friends of mine at Axel Advanced. And then I have this, or I will be getting at some point, this Ex Umbris Design assault belt. And it's a duty belt to run all your, I run a holster. I run 2 pistol mags. I run another AR mag. I run a multi-tool. I run an IFAK. IFAK optional on the back, depending on what backpack I'm carrying. All right, so at any rate, that really does it for today's talk. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, if you like my perspective on things, if you like my strategy, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And also like this video. It helped me reach more people. And thanks for watching. Until then, be well and stay out front.